Love of a King, Part 2. The Storm. In July and August, Wallis and the king sailed the Mediterranean Sea. They met important people: Prime Minister Metaxas in Greece, Kemal Ataturk in Turkey, and King Boris in Bulgaria. But that summer, people mostly talked about Edward's clothes. On the trip from Athens to Istanbul, the king took off his shirt to get a tan in the sun. It was very hot, and after 10 minutes, he fell asleep. Because he was sleeping, he didn't see a young photographer taking pictures of him. When Edward came back from the Mediterranean, there was a letter waiting for him. It was from Mr. Albert Thompson in Birmingham. He wrote, "I saw a picture of you in the newspaper today, and I felt very angry. I have never seen a king dressed so badly. No shirt, no tie, no socks, no hat, and in short trousers. How could you, sir?" Edward showed the letter to Stanley Baldwin, the Prime Minister. "What do you think?" the king asked. "Mr. Thompson is right, sir," the Prime Minister said. "You want to be modern, but the people don't like it." Edward put the letter on the fire and asked, "And do you think that divorce is modern, Mr. Baldwin?" The Prime Minister sat down. "Yes, sir," he said. "I have read about Mrs. Simpson. She has 2 husbands who are still alive. You must understand, sir, that she cannot marry a king." "But I cannot live without her," Edward said. "Then, sir," the Prime Minister said, "I see there is a storm coming. I have talked to your family and to Archbishop Lang. We will not have this woman as our queen." That night, the Prime Minister and the king talked for many hours. There were many questions, but only one answer. Early the next morning, Edward said, "You tell me Wallis cannot marry a king, so there is only one thing I can do. I will give the crown to my brother and leave England. I must follow my heart. You tell me it is a crime to fall in love. You tell me it is wrong to be happy. How strange this country is." 1 hour later, Edward called Wallis. "The Prime Minister says a storm is coming," Edward said. "So I want you to go away." Wallis packed her bags and left for France. Then Edward went to see his mother. It was a sad, strange, and angry meeting. "Do you know what you are doing?" the Queen asked. "Look out of the window. Outside the palace there are 400,000 people who call you king. They need you, and you will leave all this for Mrs. Simpson?" "Yes, Mother, I will. I am in love." "Love?" Queen Mary shouted. "You're a king! You must love your country first." "But I'm also a man," Edward said quietly. "There's nothing I can do." That afternoon, the king called Winston Churchill, one of his closest friends. "I have some sad news," Edward said. "Last night Mr. Baldwin came to see me. I have decided to leave next week." "Do you mean on holiday, sir?" Churchill asked. "No, Winston. I am leaving England. I am never coming back. George will be king." "But that's not right, sir. You're a free man. You must stand and fight." "No," the king said. "I have seen war and it is terrible. I don't want to fight again." "But the people love you, and they want Wallis to be queen." Maybe they do, Edward replied. But she cannot be queen. My enemies are stronger than I am. I am just a sailor. When the wind changes, the sea moves and it takes my boat away. The woman I love. A few days later, Mr. Churchill came to see Edward at Buckingham Palace. At first, the king was quiet. Then he said, "This is my last night in England, Winston. I love this country. I wanted to be a modern, kind king. I wanted to change the world, but they stopped me. And now I have to leave." It was 10 o'clock. Edward stood and walked to the window. In the dark streets below, hundreds of people were singing and calling his name. "Edward! Edward! We love Edward!" they shouted. "Long live the king! Long live love!" Suddenly, the king turned to Mr. Churchill and cried, "Why is this happening to me, Winston? What have I done wrong?" He sat down and put his head in his hands. There was silence in the room, but from the open window came shouting from the street. "Long live Edward! Long live love! Long live Edward! Long live love!" Mr. Churchill came over and put his hand on the king's arm. Edward looked up and said, "Thank you, Winston. You were a good friend to me." "Thank you, sir. And you were a good king," Mr. Churchill replied. The next morning at 10 o'clock, the telephone rang in Edward's bedroom. "They're ready for you now, sir," a voice said. The king walked slowly down the stairs. In front of him was an open door. His family was waiting. His mother sat near the window, dressed in black. His brothers stood beside her. "How close they are," the king thought. On a small table in the center of the room was a piece of paper. Edward sat down and read, "I, Edward VIII, King of Great Britain, King of India, King of Australia, King of New Zealand, King of Canada, King of Kenya, King of Nigeria, King of Burma, King of Malaya, King of Singapore, and King of 32 other countries, have today given the crown to my brother George. God be with him and all his people. 10th December, 1936. Edward took a pen and signed the paper. Then he stood up and kissed his brother's hand. "I never wanted this to happen," George said. "This is the worst day of my life." Edward walked to his mother. "Before I kiss you," she said, "there are some things I want to say. I have never understood you, child. This morning you were a king, but tonight you will run from England like a thief, alone, angry, afraid. You think you are free, but you are not. You cannot be free. Everyone needs their family. Everyone needs their home. And tonight you have lost both. I love you. I am your mother, and nothing can change that. But if you marry that woman, you will break my heart. Go now. It is very sad." Edward kissed Queen Mary's hand, then turned and walked away. The next day, Edward went to Windsor Castle. He went to a small, cold room at the top of the building. From there, he spoke on BBC radio to Britain and the world. "Tonight, for the first time, I can say a few words to you. Earlier today I gave the crown to my brother George. He is now your king. I will soon leave this country and travel to France. My heart is with Wallis, and I cannot live without the woman I love.
I don't know what will happen to me. Perhaps I will never see England again. But think of me tonight when I sail across the sea. God be with you. Long live King George.
Edward left Windsor Castle and got into a large black car. It was midnight, and the rain was just beginning. "Take me away as quickly as you can," he said. The car moved into the darkness and rain. "What a night!" said the driver. "I think the sky is crying, sir." At 1:30 a.m., they arrived at Portsmouth. Edward got out of the car. A voice said, "The king is here!" Edward stopped and looked out at the open sea. There was a thin, cold smile on his face.
"King?"
he said. "No, I am not the king. I am just a man in love." Then he turned and walked onto the ship and into the night. The wedding. The next morning, Edward called Wallis from the Ritz.
"Did you listen to me on the radio?"
he asked. "Yes, of course," she said.
"And how did you feel?"
he asked. "I was sitting alone in my room," Wallis said. "When I heard your words, I felt very sad. I covered my eyes with my hands and cried. I couldn't stop myself. You have left everything for me. But I love you so much, Edward. With me, you will be the happiest man in the world."
"I am that already,"
Edward replied. "You are all that matters in my life." Edward married Wallis Simpson 6 months later, on 3rd June 1937. None of the royal family came to the wedding. Edward was 43. Wallis was 41. They took a new title, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. A few weeks later, Edward wrote to his brother, King George. "I was surprised you didn't come to the wedding," he wrote. "But Wallis is my wife now, and nothing can change that. As you know, we have a house in Paris. But France is not my home. I want to live again at Windsor with Wallis by my side." King George wrote back, "I'm sorry, Edward, but you know how I feel about that woman. I do not like her. I will never like her. You can live here, but Wallis cannot."
"My brother," Edward said later, "pushed me away like a dog. I will never forget what he did. After that, I decided I didn't want my family. They didn't want Wallis, so I didn't want them. Paris."
For the next 30 years, the Duke and Duchess lived in Paris. They gave parties and traveled around the world, but they never returned to Buckingham Palace. When King George died in 1952 and Queen Mary in 1961, Edward returned to Windsor for a few days, but Wallis stayed in France. "It's your family," she said. "Not mine." In 1966, the Duke and Duchess met Queen Elizabeth, King George's daughter, at a small party in London. After 30 long years, it was time to forget the past. Elizabeth kissed the Duchess and touched her arm. Then she said to the Duke, "Wallis is so beautiful, Uncle. I think you're a lucky man." That day, Elizabeth was very kind to us, Edward wrote later. But why couldn't my mother or brother say those words to me? On BBC television in 1969, the Duke and Duchess talked about their life together. Do you argue? Someone asked. No, not really, the Duchess replied. But there is one thing I don't like about my husband. He is always late. It doesn't matter if he's meeting a queen, a president, or a film star. He can never arrive on time.
I have tried to change him, but it's not possible.
The Duke smiled and held her hand.
I know I'm often late, he said. But on our wedding day, I arrived at the church 20 minutes before you. I was early, and you were late. Yes, that's true, the Duchess said, and they both laughed. You could see real love in their eyes, one newspaper wrote.
They were on television but forgot the cameras and millions watching. They were just two people in love.
The Duchess was famous for her jewelry. After my husband, she once said, I love jewelry more than anything else in the world. After 35 years with the Duke, she had hundreds of pieces from all over the world. I have never met a more beautiful woman than Wallis, Edward wrote. I love giving her presents. She has given me so much happiness. I buy her jewels to say thank you.
In May 1972, the Duke became ill. When the doctor listened to his heart, he asked, How many cigarettes do you smoke a day, sir?
About 40 or 50, Edward replied.
But please don't ask me to stop. I've smoked for 60 years, and I cannot change now.
That night, Edward called Wallis. I feel very tired and afraid, he said. I love you. I have been very happy with you, and you have been a wonderful wife. When I die, I want you to take my body back to Windsor. Will you do that for me?
Yes, of course, she said, and they both cried. The Duke of Windsor died 1 hour later with Wallis by his side. 3 days later, a blue aeroplane arrived in Paris. Wallis took the Duke's body back to England. For the first time in her life, she entered Buckingham Palace. A week later, the Duchess returned to France. For the next 14 years, she lived alone in Paris. The big house was dark, and the doors were locked. She did not go out. In the afternoons, she sat in the dining room, reading Edward's love letters. They were so beautiful, she said. I read them again and again. In 1986, Wallis became ill. She went to a small hospital near the house, and a few days later, she died. Without Edward, she once wrote, my life was empty. She was buried in England next to her husband at Windsor. It's a strange thing, one newspaper wrote. When they were alive, the Duke and Duchess could never live in Britain. It was only in death that they could be there together. Long live love! In 1970, 2 years before he died, Edward said, Some people think I was wrong to give up my crown, but they don't understand true love. When I was young, I lived in Buckingham Palace and could have anything I wanted, but I wasn't happy because my heart was empty.
Then I met Wallis, and everything changed. For half my life, I have lived here with the most beautiful woman in the world. She means everything to me. When I sit in my garden with the Duchess beside me, I sometimes think about my early life. I remember being alone in my bedroom, the teacher who hit me with a stick, the war, and my travels.
I also remember the crowds below my window shouting, "Long live love!" On my last night in London, I spoke with Winston Churchill. During our talk, he said, "The best things in life are free." I have never forgotten that. Now I understand what he meant. You cannot buy happiness or love. True happiness deep in your heart is the most wonderful thing in the world. I have been lucky, and so I say, thank God for Wallis, and long live love. The end.
Thank you for listening. This was a simple story in English. Listen again and try to read with me. See you next time. Bye.